It started as a quiet disappearance, just another missing girl story. But what authorities uncovered shook the entire community to its core. Lina Sardar Khil wasn't just a name in a police report. She was a bright, young life, full of dreams, suddenly vanished without a trace. Families prayed. Friends panicked and the nation watched, desperate for answers that never came until a lead surfaced. Could the clues that finally emerged really bring justice? Or were they about to turn everything upside down? Photos of Lina, smiling, frozen in time. Her school bag left untouched at home, a diary full of everyday dreams suddenly abandoned, each detail pointing to a mystery that seemed impossible to solve. Just when it seemed the case was finally about to be solved, a single, shocking clue emerged that no one saw coming, completely rewriting the story and leaving investigators stunned. This new clue didn't just complicate the investigation. It shattered assumptions, revealing secrets that no one imagined, and sending shockwaves through everyone who thought they knew the truth. Who could have been behind Lina's disappearance? Why was this clue hidden for so long? Could this finally lead to the answers everyone was waiting for? Or is the truth even darker than anyone imagined? Every step forward in the case felt like a step closer to justice. But with each revelation, the heartbreak only deepened. This isn't just a story about a missing girl. It's a chilling reminder that sometimes the truth refuses to stay hidden until it hits with devastating force. Stay with us as we unravel the twists, the shocking revelations, and the final moments that could change everything in the heartbreaking mystery of Lina Sardar Khil. Think of what your action means. One subscribe means one more voice demanding justice. One like means one more person joining Lina Sardar Khil fight. One comment means one more sign of support for her family. When you subscribe to The Case Point, you are helping us spread awareness worldwide. Please subscribe, like, comment, and share this video so Lina Sardar Khil's story never fades. On December 20th, 2021, shortly before 5 p.m. in Northwest San Antonio, Texas, a 3-year-old girl named Lina Sardar Khil was playing at a small playground near the Villas del Cabo apartment complex on Fredericksburg Road when the unthinkable happened. According to law enforcement records, authorities received the missing persons report that evening after Lina's family realized she was no longer at the playground. The child had been with her mother and younger sibling, and at one point during a brief moment when her mother was not looking directly at her, Lina simply vanished. Official surveillance footage later released by the San Antonio Police Department shows Lina on the playground moments before she disappeared. In the grainy video, she walks with other children, her small figure clad in a red dress, black jacket, and tiny black shoes, the last confirmed sighting of her that day. By dusk, law enforcement had declared an active missing persons investigation. The San Antonio Police Department, SAPD, in conjunction with the FBI, began canvassing the area. Investigators interviewed residents of the complex, checked door to door, and searched nearby streets and wooded areas, hoping for even the smallest clue. Early in the search, an Amber Alert was issued, but was later discontinued by authorities. SAPD stressed that the investigation remained open and that officers were following all relevant leads, even as a public alert was deactivated. Throughout that first night and the following days, forensic teams and K-9 units combed the vicinity. FBI dive teams were deployed to search waterways near the complex, and neighborhood canvases expanded block by block. Yet no physical trace of Lina was found. In the weeks that followed, recorded tips poured in from the public. Some led investigators to wooded areas near Interstate 10 and Wurzbach Road, roughly a mile from Lina's last known location. SAPD and federal agents conducted exhaustive searches based on these tips. One tip in early 2024 even triggered a multi-day ground search, but after weeks of effort, law enforcement publicly determined it was not credible. At a February 2024 press briefing, SAPD emphasized it was following every piece of information that came in, though not all could be shared publicly. The FBI confirmed that it continued to work with local authorities on all received leads and urged anyone with information to come forward. Yet, even as the investigation unfolded, one unsettling fact remained. No confirmed sighting beyond that playground silhouette has ever been verified, and no credible evidence has emerged to explain how a vibrant little girl playing at dusk could simply disappear. Law enforcement documents show that by the end of 2025, nearly 4 years since Lina's disappearance, the case was still listed as active with no identified suspects. SAPD repeatedly stated that while they had followed up on numerous leads and conducted multiple searches, none had produced definitive answers. As dusk fell on that December evening in 2021, a normal, ordinary moment became an unsolved mystery, one that would ripple far beyond a single playground and haunt investigators and Lina's family alike. And as authorities continued to dig deeper into the timeline of Lina's last hours that evening, a piece of evidence quietly resurfaced, one that would shift how the investigation was understood and raise a question no one had yet answered. The moment an Amber Alert was issued for Lina Sardar Khil in late December 2021, hope spread through San Antonio like a sudden rush of light. The alert went out across Texas, flagging her disappearance and urging every driver, every passerby, anyone who saw a small child matching her description take notice. This was the strongest signal, yet that Lina was being actively sought, and it brought an urgency to the streets and to the hearts of the community. For nearly 3 weeks after she vanished from the playground near the 9400 block of Fredericksburg Road, law enforcement held the alert active. It was not mere routine. Amber Alerts are typically triggered only when authorities believe a child is missing and possibly abducted, and when there's information that could help identify a suspect, a vehicle, or a direction to travel. Day after day, the alert broadcasted Lina's name, her age, her last known appearance, and the plea that she may be in imminent danger. For people across Texas and neighboring states, it was a repeated call. A small life was missing, her family waiting. Every time her face flickered across a screen or radio call, someone somewhere had a moment to register it, a chance for a lead that might bring answers. And in cases like these, every lead, no matter how small, matters. But on January 7th, 2022, less than 3 weeks after the alert began, the Amber Alert was discontinued. The Texas Department of Public Safety removed it from the active alert system. No detailed explanation was provided publicly for this decision, and law enforcement used the word procedural when referring to why the alert was suspended. Yet the case did not go cold. In the hours after the alert's removal, the San Antonio Police Department made it clear in official statements that the disappearance remained an active missing person investigation. Detectives emphasized that the suspension of the alert did not signal an end to the search. Far from it. Officers reiterated that they were still following up on every piece of information received, that every tip was being reviewed, and that the investigation continued with full resources. At that time, federal partners, including the FBI, had already been working with local detectives, diving into evidence and offering specialized support. The alert's end was not the end of effort, but it did mark a shift from a broad public signal to a more targeted, complex, and confidential phase of the investigation. It was my human reaction, watching this unfold through official reports, that the moment the alert ended was when the search felt both more serious and more fragile, as if the responsibility now rested not with the public screens, but in the quieter work behind closed doors. Yet even as the alert faded from phones and radios, one nagging question persisted, a question that would reshape how investigators approached every subsequent lead. The release of surveillance footage in December 2022 brought the first real visual context to the disappearance of Lina Sardar Khil. San Antonio police publicly shared video from a resident security camera that captured the moments before Lina vanished on December 20th, 2021. This was not dramatic reenactment. It was real. It was a last unfiltered image of a little girl playing in a familiar space. In the grainy clip, Lina appears near the playground at the Villas del Cabo apartment complex on the 9400 block of Fredericksburg Road. She is seen with her family, engaged in ordinary play, a scene that felt ordinary to everyone who watched it, but would soon be forever re-examined by investigators, experts, and the public alike. Law enforcement officials confirmed that this footage was the only known visual record of her on that day. According to San Antonio Police Department statements, the lead detective noted that at a certain point in the video, Lina simply walked out of frame, and that is the last confirmed moment she was on camera. The release of this material was both a breakthrough and a heartbreak. On the one hand, it provided investigators with a recorded timestamp of her last movements, Agencies at local, state, and federal levels had a fixed point in time and space from which to structure their ongoing inquiry. On the other hand, the footage offered no insight beyond a fleeting glimpse, no suspicious figures, no signs of distress, no clear indication of what happened next. Police repeatedly emphasized that despite the public release of this footage, hundreds of leads that had been submitted before and after remained unresolved. Detectives stated they had worked with multiple law enforcement partners to follow up on every tip, yet none had yielded definitive evidence about Lina's whereabouts. One notable part of the official commentary at the time was a characterization of the circumstances as suspicious, given her young age and the absence of evidence explaining her disappearance beyond the playground footage. This was not speculation. It was how investigators publicly described the gap left by the surveillance video itself. From a human perspective, seeing that everyday moment of play frozen on camera was deeply affecting. It reminded the world that in an ordinary second, everything can change. It also raised a question that has continued to haunt this investigation. And that question led investigators to re-examine a piece of evidence that at first had been overlooked, a detail that would shift how the case was approached moving forward. When the San Antonio Police Department expanded the search for Lina Sardar Khil, local efforts were already thorough. But in late December 2021, law enforcement announced that federal resources had joined the case. A specialized unit of the Federal Bureau of Investigation had arrived in San Antonio from Washington, D.C. to support the search effort with advanced capabilities not previously deployed. This was the FBI's Underwater Search and Evidence Response Team, a 12-member group trained to examine waterway for evidence that might be submerged or obscured. SAPD Chief William McManus confirmed the team had been asked to follow up on a specific lead, one that took investigators beyond playgrounds and sidewalks into areas that had not been closely examined in the first weeks of the investigation. The site they focused on was a creek bed several miles north of the Villas del Cabo apartments near Babcock Road and Huebner Road. It was an area that local law enforcement had not searched underwater before, and the presence of flowing water meant that evidence could have easily gone unnoticed without specialized equipment. For 2 days, this team combed the creek with sonar detection tools and manual inspection techniques, methodically tracking possible pieces of material beneath the surface. Each sweep was deliberate, precise. Every inch of that murky channel covered in hopes of finding something that could break this mystery open. During a press briefing at the search site, Chief McManus made it clear that this dive effort was not based on certainty, but on thoroughness. He told reporters that law enforcement did not want to leave any avenue unexplored, and that every lead, no matter how small, had to be followed. Yet when the FBI dive team concluded its effort on January 6, 2022, officials acknowledged that no trace of Lina, no physical evidence, no personal item, no clue that pointed toward her, had been found during the underwater search. Despite the intensity of the effort, there was nothing conclusive to show investigators were any closer to understanding what had happened that December evening. From an investigative standpoint, this was a sobering reality. Critical ground had been covered, advanced resources had been deployed, and still no breakthrough had emerged. It underscored the depth of uncertainty surrounding Lina's disappearance, and it raised an uneasy question about whether every potential clue had truly been found and examined. And as the FBI wrapped up the dive search and detectives reviewed the data collected, they turned their attention to something that had been quietly sitting in the case file, a fragment of information that, until now, had been largely overlooked. When the San Antonio Police Department first announced a reward for information on Lina Sardar Khil, it was December 24th, 2021, just 4 days after the 3-year-old vanished from a playground on the northwest side of the city. Local officials revealed a $50,000 reward offered by Crime Stoppers of San Antonio and supported by community partners who wanted answers in a case that had already drawn widespread concern. The message was clear. Even the smallest tip could be the key investigators needed. In those first days, law enforcement repeatedly asked anyone who had seen Lina or spoken to her family on December 20th, 2021 to contact the Missing Persons Unit. The official release emphasized that no detail was too small, and detectives were prepared to follow leads no matter how faint they seemed. As the search continued through late December, the community response was unexpected in its scale. The Islamic Center of San Antonio, where Lina's family had ties, began offering its own reward. Their contribution raised the total cash incentive significantly, aiming to spur more tips from residents and passers-by who might otherwise remain silent. By February 2022, the reward pool had continued to increase as advocates and community groups stepped forward. Crime Stoppers maintained its $50,000 offer, while local organizations raised additional funds, pushing the total toward $250,000 for information that could either lead to Lina's safe return or to the identification of anyone involved in her disappearance. It was not only the amount that drew attention, but the way tips began to pour in from across the region. Investigators with the San Antonio Police Department and the FBI shared that they were receiving numerous calls and online submissions. Every tip was logged, examined, and cross-referenced against known timelines. Authorities repeatedly reminded the public that they were carefully evaluating each submission, whether it pointed toward the immediate area around Fredericksburg Road or further afield. Some leads extended search efforts into wooded areas and drainage channels near Interstate 10 and Wurzbach Road, based on information from community members. After days of concentrated searches, law enforcement publicly labeled that particular tip not credible, but underscored how far some leads had taken investigators. From my perspective, watching the rewards grow and tips coming was a stark reminder how complex these investigations can become. The chase for truth isn't linear, and it's fueled by both urgency and uncertainty. But one emerging clue, buried deep in the flood of submissions, would soon pull the investigation in a new direction. In the spring of 2023, more than 16 months after Lina Sardar Khil vanished on December 20th, 2021, an event occurred that drew renewed attention to the unresolved search. On April 20th, 2023, Lina Sardar Khil, the father of the missing child, willingly submitted to a polygraph test at the FBI field office in San Antonio. This was not an episode of conjecture. It was an official step taken with law enforcement oversight as a means to address lingering questions in the case. Law enforcement records and local reporting confirmed that the polygraph examination was initiated by the Federal Bureau of Investigation, not by the San Antonio Police Department, and was conducted with the apparent purpose of helping investigators rule out immediate family involvement and allow detectives to redirect attention where it might be most productive. Witnesses saw Lina Khil leave the FBI facility near the University of Texas at San Antonio after several hours, a closed chapter in a long, complex inquiry that had drawn scrutiny from both the public and media. Officials did not disclose the results of the examination, and as of public reporting, detectives declined to comment on whether the outcome changed the course of the investigation. What is known from official follow-up reporting is that this was not the first time law enforcement had considered family statements carefully. Interviews with both parents had occurred early in the case. The decision to allow a polygraph at this later stage underscores how long and multi-layered the inquiry had become, and how investigators at multiple levels remain committed to exhausting every avenue for clarity. Importantly, San Antonio police continue to treat Lina's disappearance as a missing person case, noting there was no verified evidence of an abduction, even as a polygraph test for a father unfolded publicly. Authorities reiterated that every lead and piece of information, including results from specialized procedures like lie detector tests, were being reviewed in context with physical evidence, surveillance, and hundreds of other tips received over time. From a human perspective, seeing a parent step forward under official scrutiny reveals how deeply complex these investigations can become. It reflects not just procedural thoroughness, but the weight of unanswered questions that remain years after a child's disappearance. Yet even as a polygraph chapter closed, law enforcement pointed to a fragment of testimony from a separate tip that appeared to conflict with earlier statements, a contradiction that would compel detectives to open a new line of inquiry. In February 2024, more than 2 years after Lina Sardar Khil disappeared, a new development briefly reignited official search efforts in northwest San Antonio. Law enforcement agencies, including the San Antonio Police Department and the FBI, responded to a tip that directed them to a wooded area near Wurzbach Road and Blumel Road, roughly half a mile from where Lina was last seen at playground in December 2021. On the morning of February 15, 2024, officers, K-9 units, and crime scene investigators entered the dense thicket of trees and brush on the northwest side, following up on information that someone believed might connect that location to Lina's disappearance. Responding to the tip, authorities moved cautiously, treating the lead with seriousness while knowing that every decision would be scrutinized by the public and the family alike. This wooded tract was not part of the initial search perimeter from 2021, but investigators understood that new information, even if years old, can sometimes reveal overlooked paths. In official statements, SAPD emphasized that hundreds of tips had been submitted over time and that each was being carefully evaluated. The department had committed to following up on every credible lead, no matter how remote it appeared. For 2 days, officers and federal partners combed the ground. Law enforcement brought in excavation equipment, subject matter experts, and tools designed to detect anomalies beneath the Earth's surface. At times, teams worked alongside the family's advocate, Pamela Allen of Eagles Flight Advocacy and Outreach, who had been engaged with the case since early in the investigation. Despite the effort and the hopeful anticipation that comes with fresh action, investigators ultimately determined that the tip did not yield credible evidence connected to Lina's disappearance. Public information officers confirmed that after exhausting all search resources in that wooded zone, the lead was deemed not credible and no physical evidence was found. From a human perspective, watching trained investigators' dogs and specialized tools move through that tangled terrain was a stark reminder how thorough a missing person inquiry must be, and how many turns can still lead to dead ends. Yet even as official crews stood down from that site, the question that remained was not one of closure, but direction. What unseen clue, buried in another place or overlooked in earlier interviews, might still hold a key to uncovering the truth? In March 2024, more than 2 years after Lina Sardar Khil disappeared from a playground in northwest San Antonio, Texas, a new tool entered the investigation. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, NCMEC, released an age-progressed image showing what Lina might look like at 6 years old, a visual estimate grounded in forensic artistry and scientific methods used in long-term missing person inquiries. This image, developed by trained specialists, was created to renew public attention and encourage fresh leads that could assist investigators. Law enforcement agencies, including the San Antonio Police Department and the FBI, share the image alongside official missing person information as part of ongoing efforts to keep Lina's story visible years after her disappearance. Age progression is a recognized investigative method when a child has been missing for a significant period. It uses existing photographs, growth patterns, and biometric markers to project appearance changes over time. In Lina's case, the released image represented a careful scientific approximation of how her facial features, height, and proportions might have developed since she was last seen as a 3-year-old on December 20th, 2021. Public response to age-progressed images in missing child cases has historically been mixed, sometimes prompting valuable tips, and other instances drawing insubstantial inquiries. Law enforcement emphasized that while no lead has yet led to a confirmed sighting of Lina, images like these are shared widely in hopes that someone may recognize her in a new context or recall an overlooked detail that could intersect with other verified clues. The release of this visual update coincided with continued public appeals for information, including promotion of reward funds that have been increased by community groups and family advocates. These efforts were documented in official press releases and media reports, reflecting ongoing attempts to keep Lina's name present in both public awareness and investigative focus. Seeing the projected image of Lina, no longer 3, but a child potentially beginning school, with subtle changes in her features, was a stark reminder of time's passage. It underscored how long the search has persisted and how many moments have slipped by without answers. And yet, even as updated images circulated, there remained a troubling gap in confirmed sightings, the gap that would soon push investigators to a fresh line of inquiry. By late 2025, nearly 4 years had passed since Lina Sardar Khil vanished near a playground in northwest San Antonio. Despite extensive efforts involving the San Antonio Police Department and the FBI, official updates from law enforcement had grown sparse. In a news release dated December 22, 2025, SAPD reaffirmed that the case remained active, but offered no new leads or breakthroughs while emphasizing multi-agency coordination and sustained review of tips and search efforts. For Lina's family, that official silence, measured in months without substantive public information, was a heavy and persistent presence. By October 2025, Advocates publicly noted that the last contact the family had received from SAPD came during a February 2024 search of a wooded area near the family's former apartment complex, a lead that ultimately yielded no evidence. This gap in communication widened frustration among those closest to the case. Pamela Allen, a long-standing family advocate with Eagles Flight Advocacy and Outreach, spoke at a news conference in late 2025 about how the lack of regular updates left the family feeling increasingly isolated within an investigation that had once generated intense local attention. She explained that the family had not heard from investigators in more than a year. Even as years had passed without resolution, that absence of outward contact from SAPD occurred in contrast to earlier years, when authorities regularly provided public statements about search efforts, rewards, and ongoing investigations. In 2022 and 2023, police shared surveillance footage and confirmed searches based on tips, and even announced rewards for information that could aid the case. In response to the communication gap, Lina's family and advocacy partners began organizing to change how missing person investigations involve families. They worked on a proposed Bill of Rights for Families of the Missing, a document intended to encourage clearer expectations for law enforcement communication, accountability, and transparency in long-term investigations. From the perspective of someone observing these events unfold through official reports and community statements, this period marked a quiet but powerful shift. Attention was no longer just on a physical search for Lina, but also on how information, or the lack of it, shaped the journey itself. Yet just as frustration was cresting into organized advocacy, a fragment of information, long in police files but rarely discussed publicly, began to draw new scrutiny. As December 20th, 2025 approached, 4 years had passed since Lina Sardar Khil disappeared from a playground on the northwest side of San Antonio, Texas. In an official statement released by the San Antonio Police Department on December 22nd, 2025, authorities reaffirmed that the investigation remained active. Detectives were still working with federal, state, and local partners, including the FBI San Antonio Child Exploitation and Human Trafficking Task Force, pursuing leads and reviewing every piece of information received over the years. SAP's year-end release detailed the extensive efforts undertaken since December 2021. 5 broad searches have been conducted across the area, including ground searches, neighborhood canvases, excavations, and underwater search supported by the FBI's Specialized Dive Team. Investigators had also carried out hundreds of interviews, obtained legal process to analyze digital evidence, and followed up on leads extending beyond Texas, even into parts of Canada. Yet none had produced a definitive resolution. Despite these documented efforts, public announcements from law enforcement had become infrequent. According to reporting from October 2025, Lina's family had last received direct communication from SAPD in February 2024, following a search in a wooded area near her last known location, a search that ultimately yielded no new evidence. Since then, official statements have been limited to broad reassurances that the case was active without release of new investigative developments. Community members and advocacy groups continue to raise awareness, and age-progressed images of what Lina might look like at 7 years old were circulated to help generate tips. But as her 4th anniversary approached, both family and neighbors expressed frustration at the lack of publicly shared progress. SAPD reiterated that all tips and leads were carefully reviewed, including those deemed inconsistent or unsubstantiated, and that the investigation had not been closed. From a human perspective, for years without a breakthrough in such a case feels like an echo, a long silence where once there was so much motion. The absence of fresh public updates from investigators only deepens the sense of unanswered questions that hang over the search. Nearly 4 years after December 20th, 2021, when 3-year-old Lina Sardar Khil disappeared from a playground on the northwest side of San Antonio, Texas, the landscape of the investigation shifted again. In October 2025, the family made a public announcement. They were putting their own resources into hiring a private investigator and pursue leads they believed had not yet been fully explored. This decision came after months of limited communication from the San Antonio Police Department. According to statements from family advocates, the last direct update from SAPD came in February 2024, following an extensive search in a wooded area near the family's former apartment complex, a lead that law enforcement later deemed not credible. Advocates at the press conference cited specific tips that had surfaced during the investigation, including one from an inmate once on the U.S. Marshal's most wanted list who lived near the family at the time, that they believe were not fully addressed earlier. A comment on social media from someone who claimed to have seen Lina with a man not her father on the day she disappeared was another example mentioned by the family's representatives, and was work the private investigator aimed to revisit. According to family statements to media, the private investigator was brought in specifically to examine these overlooked angles and to reevaluate how tips had been handled, including leads that never produced searchable evidence or were not publicly reported. These details were described by advocates as part of a broader effort by the family to pursue every possible thread of information publicly. SAPD maintained that it continued to investigate Lina's disappearance and follow all leads. In response to inquiries about the private investigator, the department reiterated that it uses all tools available and works with federal partners, urging anyone with information to contact law enforcement. From where I stand, watching this case evolve into independent investigation reflects the deep complexity of long-term missing person inquiries. When official channels quiet and the unanswered questions deepen, families sometimes take extraordinary steps with their own resources to keep every possibility alive. Yet even as the private investigator began re-examining old leads, there emerged a new discrepancy in early witness reports, one that would call into question part of the original timeline. In the days and weeks after December 20th, 2021, when 3-year-old Lina Sardar Khil vanished from a playground on the northwest side of San Antonio, Texas, the community response was immediate and visible. Within a few days of her disappearance, neighbors, faith leaders, and residents from across the city gathered at St. Francis Episcopal Church on the northwest side for a prayer vigil asking for her safe return. Members of the Afghan community, the Muslim community, and other faith groups stood side by side in a collective plea for information and hope. As the investigation into Lina Sardar Khil's disappearance pushed past its early weeks and stretched into years, different theories about what happened began to circulate publicly, not from law enforcement conclusions, but from a fragment of information, tips, and community responses that accompanied the case. From the earliest days after December 20th, 2021, when Lina vanished from a playground in northwest San Antonio, Texas, SAPD and FBI officials described the case as a missing person investigation with no evidence or proof that it was an abduction. Police Chief William McManus explained that despite extensive searching, they had no verified signs of abduction, a point that left room for differing interpretations about why Lina disappeared. One theory, mentioned in credible media reporting, revolved around the idea that Lina might have left with someone she knew. In October 2025, the family's advocate referenced a potential sighting in which someone claimed to have seen Lina walking hand in hand with a man who was not her father, a report that was not initially disclosed to the family, but later shared in public statements. Investigators followed this lead with the help of forensic artists, but the trail went cold. Another angle emerged from national missing person advocates involved in the case. Former FBI agent Abel Pena, director of Project Absentes, noted that while investigators had not publicly confirmed a specific scenario, the possibility remained that Lina could have been taken by someone known to her or left with someone voluntarily, both plausible within the realm of professional investigation. Amid these theories arose an unsettling undercurrent in the community. Some individuals made unsubstantiated accusations against the family, suggesting implausible scenarios that drew accusations of bias and harassment rather than evidence-based consideration. Local reporting documented instances where such claims led to threats against the family and volunteers, prompting law enforcement intervention. Law enforcement itself has not endorsed any specific theory beyond confirming that no credible evidence has yet clarified Lina's fate. SAP's official statements noted that inconsistent or unsubstantiated claims have been reviewed, but that every piece of information must be corroborated before it can alter the investigative direction. From my perspective, this mixture of unverified theories and official restraint highlights the shadowed space in which this case exists, where speculation fills silence, even as documented facts remain elusive. And amid these conflicting threads, one unresolved question persisted, a detail so small yet so persistent that it would eventually reopen discussion about what truly happened the afternoon she vanished. Even after 4 years since December 20th, 2021, When Lina Sardar Khil was last seen at a playground in northwest San Antonio, Texas, there remain crucial gaps in what law enforcement and the public truly understand about her disappearance. Despite exhaustive efforts by the San Antonio Police Department, SAPD, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and other agencies, no definitive answer has emerged about how or why she vanished. Official releases from SAPD emphasize how many methods have been employed, from 5 extensive search operations across various terrains, including ground canvassing, excavations, an FBI underwater search team combing waterways, to hundreds of interviews and digital evidence reviews. Yet none have yielded a confirmed explanation for Lina's disappearance. As of the end of 2025, authorities state clearly that every tip and lead is reviewed and pursued, regardless of source. But they also note that some information received was inconsistent or had no substantiation to move the case forward. What remains unknown is whether a sign, object, or recorded moment exists anywhere that can bridge the gap between her last verified sighting and her current unknown status. One unresolved question lies in why surveillance and search resources, thorough as they were, have not uncovered even a trace of her movements after she walked away from the playground. In December 2022, law enforcement released surveillance footage from cameras near the playground showing her moments before she disappeared. Yet that visual trail ends abruptly and without explanation. Another glaring unknown continues to be the lack of any identified suspect or person of interest connected by verified evidence to Lina's vanishing. Even though early police statements describe the circumstances as suspicious, there has been no public disclosure of credible forensic links or witness evidence that leads to an individual or a specific theory backed by law enforcement. Additionally, the suspension of the Amber Alert in early January 2022, while the case remained active, left unanswered questions about what factors influence the continuation or cancellation of such alerts and how that affects search momentum. From a human perspective, these unknowns create a silence that feels heavier with each passing year, a silence that official reports cannot yet fill. And as the investigation remains open into 2026, there is one persistent gap that continues to pull at investigators and the public alike. Why no physical trace of Lina has ever been confirmed, despite intense scrutiny and resources?